The gentle sound of the whiskey glass touching the table seems to be amplified in the sudden silence of the restaurant. Sophie stands still, her breathing quickening in front of her. Clint Eastwood stares at her with icy calm, but his eyes communicate a challenge that the young waitress had not anticipated. "If you want, we can continue this conversation, but are you sure you're ready for the end?" Clint says in his hoarse, sharp voice, as if it were a line from one of his famous westerns. Sophie feels the tension building around her. Closer customers whisper to each other, and colleagues watch her from afar, worried. But how is it possible that the situation degenerated so quickly? 2 hours earlier, the Beverly Prime restaurant in the heart of Beverly Hills. It shines under the golden light of the crystal chandeliers. It's a typical evening, celebrities discussing upcoming films, managers striking deals on million-dollar contracts, and influencers taking photos of their gourmet dishes. The atmosphere is that of a perfectly orchestrated stage, where every detail counts, and that's where Sophie is trying to impress. Sophia is 25 years old and has only been working at Beverly Prime for 2 months. But he has big ambitions. He's not there to bring dishes and earn tips. His goal is to gain a prominent position in the management of the restaurant. That's why every shift is a test. Every customer is an opportunity to prove their worth. And then she sees him sitting at a corner table, away from the main lights. There's a man who seems out of place. He wears a worn brown leather jacket, faded jeans, and cowboy boots. He didn't ask for champagne or lobster. He just ordered a glass of whiskey. Sophie watches him from afar and purses her lips in a grimace of disapproval. What's a guy dressed like that doing in a place like this? He thinks, shaking his head. She is convinced that he is one of those customers who orders the bare minimum and occupies a table for hours. Sophie decides to deal with the situation with her typical professional approach. He approaches the table with a formal smile, notebook in hand, and sweet voice. "Good evening, sir. Can I help you? With the complete menu, we have a wide selection of exclusive dishes, perfect to accompany your drink." The man looks up, his cold, intense eyes fixed on her for a moment. There's something familiar about him, but Sophie can't figure out what. "No thanks," he replies calmly. "My whiskey is enough." Sophie is not discouraged. "I understand," she replies. "But maybe you'd rather sit at the bar. This table is reserved for those who want a full dinner. It's just a matter of restaurant policy." The man smiles, but it's not a smile of courtesy. It's the kind of smile that hides a challenge. And whoever decides what luxury means asks in a firm voice the price of the dish or respect for whoever enters the door. Sophie feels her heart beat faster. She tries to maintain control, but the question gets to her. "Well, in a place like this, both count," she replies, trying to mask her irritation. The man takes another sip of whiskey and sets the glass down on the table calmly. Interesting, but sometimes respect should count more than anything else. Sophie has just made the first mistake that will change the course of her evening. He judged a customer based only on appearances, without knowing who he was actually standing in front of. But Clint Eastwood is not a man who lets things go so easily. He's just waiting for the right moment to make you realize how wrong he was. The kitchen door snaps shut behind Sophie as the young waitress, trying to slow her heartbeat, leans against the counter of dirty dishes. She doesn't understand why, but that man made her feel uneasy. It's not her first time dealing with difficult or out-of-place customers, yet there's something different about him. Maybe she's just tired, she mutters to herself, picking up a tray and getting ready to return to the dining room. But as soon as she emerges from the back, Manager Thomas's stern gaze nails her. "Sophie, it's all right. I see you nervous." She forces a smile. "Everything under control. I just need to pick up the pace." Thomas looks at her for a moment, as if to say something, but finally nods and walks away. Sophie heads to the corner table, determined to wrap up the interaction as quickly as possible. But fate has another plan for her. When Sophie returns to the table, Clint Eastwood is observing the room as if he were the director of a movie, analyzing every detail, every movement. His calm irritates her. There is no haste in his gestures, no anxiety in the way he sits. "Time seems to pass at a different pace to him, sir," Sophie says, trying to keep her tone professional. "He decided if he would like something to eat, we have a steak vajou, which is our specialty." Clint looks up and smiles at her with that same enigmatic expression. "No thanks. I'm just here to enjoy my whiskey and the atmosphere." Sophie feels the pressure increase every second that passes by that table. It makes her uncomfortable. She doesn't want to make a scene, but she feels she has to act, "Sir, I don't want to seem insistent, but our restaurant has certain expectations about the customers occupying the tables." "He has expectations," Clint repeated, almost savoring the word. "And what would these expectations be? That everyone spends hundreds of dollars to feel accepted?" Sophie stiffens. Her smile cracks slightly, but she doesn't want to give up. It is not a question of money answers, but of image. Our clients expect a certain kind of environment. Clint nods slowly as if weighing every word, then leans forward slightly and looks into her eyes. "And you, Sophie, what do you expect from this job? Do you really care about creating a customer experience, or do you just want to look good in front of your boss?" The question hits her like a punch to the stomach. How does she know her name does not wear a nameplate, and none of the colleagues mentioned it in her presence? For a moment, panic runs through her veins as she knows my name. Clint smiles weakly. "I'm good at observing." Before Sophie can answer, Thomas appears beside the table. The manager has a tense expression on his face, as if he sensed that the situation is getting out of hand. "Mr. Eastwood," he says in a respectful tone. "You all right here?" "Does Sophie close her eyes, Mr. Eastwood?" She repeats to herself, while the name rings in her head like an alarm bell. Suddenly it all makes sense. The familiarity of his face, that unnatural calm, his ability to make her uncomfortable with a few words is serving Clint Eastwood, a living legend. Realization sweeps over her like a wave of icy water. She suddenly feels ridiculous, embarrassed by every word spoken up to that point. Clint doesn't take his eyes off Sophie as he answers Thomas. "All right, Thomas. Just a little conversation about the difference between appearance and substance." Thomas nods, but the tension doesn't leave his perfect face. "Mr. Eastwood, if you need anything, don't hesitate to call me." Sophie stands motionless as the manager walks away, trying to think of an excuse, something that can remedy the situation. But before she can speak, Clint anticipates her. "Now that you know who I am, do you feel any different?" he asks in a calm but penetrating tone. Sophie swallows. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." Clint raises a hand to stop her. "That's not the point. It's not who I am. It's who you are when you think you're dealing with someone who doesn't matter." Sophie wants to apologize. She wants to say something that can get her out of this situation. But Clint doesn't give her the time. "The funny thing goes on is that I've seen a lot of people like you. People who care about appearances more than content. Do you know what happens to people who live like that?" Sophie shakes her head, unable to answer. "They end up losing sight of what really matters, but you still have a chance to tell the difference." Clint puts his glass down on the table and gets up slowly. "Now I'll be back in a little while. But when I do, I want to see if you're able to recover from this mistake." Sophie watches him as his mind feverishly working to find a way out. Her world, as perfect as it had seemed to her until a few minutes earlier, has just turned upside down. Clint Eastwood gave the first blow to Sophie's safety. Now he knows who he's up against and how much he's done wrong. But this isn't the end of the confrontation. It's just the beginning of the most important lesson of his life. Sophie stood motionless in the center of the room for a few seconds, but in her mind, it was as if hours had passed. The restaurant, with its glamorous customers chatting among themselves and waiters moving silently, now feels like an alien place to her. She can't get the image of Clint Eastwood getting up from the table and walking away, leaving her with his sharp words. He walks to the kitchen mechanically, trying not to attract attention, but she feels the eyes of her colleagues on her. When he reaches the counter, he leans heavily, as if a young waiter were about to faint. Jake approaches curiously. "You all right, Sophie?" She runs a hand through her hair, loosening the bun that tightened her head. "No, not at all. I just insulted Clint Eastwood." Jake rolls his eyes. "Wait, what? Clint Eastwood? The Clint Eastwood we see in the movies?" "Exactly him," Sophie replies in a trembling voice. "Not only that, he is also the owner of the restaurant." Jake whistles in disbelief. "Wow, you're in trouble." Sophia nods as a wave of panic overwhelms her. How can she remedy it? She sees herself telling him in a contemptuous tone that the restaurant has certain standards to meet. "Words come to you like sharp blades, sir. Perhaps you'd rather sit at the bar. This table is reserved for customers consuming full dinners." He didn't even try to be nice. He treated him like anyone, like someone not worth his time. The thought makes her sink even deeper into guilt. Everyone at Beverly Prime knows Eastwood's reputation. A man who, despite his fame, is known for his humility and respect for those who work hard. He bought the restaurant not to turn it into a temple of unbridled luxury, but to keep intact the welcoming atmosphere that characterized it in the 1970s, when he frequented it himself. As a young actor, Sophie feels the weight of her actions becoming increasingly unbearable. You're about to ask Thomas if he can take a break when he hears a familiar voice. "Miss Sophie, can I steal a minute from you?" Clint Eastwood is back in the main room and now observes her with his usual impenetrable gaze. There is no anger in his eyes, but there is something worse: disappointment. Sophie swallows, fatigues, and nods, following him out the side door that leads to a small back terrace. The night air is fresh and pungent, but it doesn't help calm her. Clint leans against the iron railing and looks at the city stretching out before them. "When I was young, I used to come here often," he says, without looking back. "At the time, the restaurant was not so elegant. The floor was raw wood, and the tables did not have silk tablecloths. But there was something that made him special." Sophie is silent, waiting for him to continue. He knows this is no ordinary conversation. Every word he's about to hear could determine his future. It was special because they made you feel important, regardless of how you dressed, how much you spent. If you walked through the door, you were a guest and deserved respect. Clint finally turns to her, his eyes seeming to peer into her soul. "Do you know what it really means to be a good waiter, Sophie?" She swallows and shakes her head, serving customers well. Clint smiles slightly. "Not only. It means knowing how to see people, not their clothes. It means understanding that every person has a story, even if they don't tell it to you, and that you're not there to judge them, but to make them feel welcome." Sophie feels as if every word is a punch in the stomach. "I didn't mean to disrespect her," she murmurs, looking down. "I just thought I was doing my job the right way, and I understand that. You're talented, you're ambitious, and that's a good thing. But if you think that following the rules is enough to succeed, you are wrong." Clint pauses and then adds, "You're young, Sophie, and making mistakes is part of the process, but now you have to decide what to do with that mistake." She looks at him confused. "What do you mean?" Clint leans against the railing again and smiles at her. "I want to offer you a chance. Tomorrow, come here before your shift and you will work with me for a couple of hours. I'll teach you. What does it really mean to create an unforgettable customer experience?" Sophie is speechless. She didn't expect a second chance, especially from a legend like him. Really, Clint confirms. "But only if you are willing to learn and leave behind the idea that appearance is everything." Clint Eastwood not only forgave Sophie, He also offered her an opportunity that could change the course of her career. But to catch her, Sophie will have to face her insecurities and learn to see beyond appearances. The real test has just begun.
Sophie wakes up before the alarm goes off. She couldn't sleep well that morning, and the thought of what is tending her makes her feel even more tense every time she closed her eyes, saw Clint Eastwood's face and his penetrating gaze again. But today, he cannot afford to be wrong. Today is not just any day. It's the day you learn directly from a legend. She wears her uniform more carefully than usual, checking every detail in the mirror before going out. The morning air in Beverly Hills is crisp, and the streets are still semi-deserted. He walks quickly to the Beverly Prime, trying not to think too much, but it's useless. Every step seems accompanied by a thought, what will you teach me? What if I fail again? When he arrives, Clint is already there, sitting at a table by the window with a cup of coffee in front of him. He wears the same jeans and worn leather jacket as the night before. But this time, Sophie doesn't notice the clothes. She only notices the air of serenity that surrounds him, as if time had no power over him. Punctual, says Clint, looking up and hinting at a smile. Well, punctuality is the first sign of respect. Sophie nods and sits down at the table. Thank you for giving me this chance, Mr. Eastwood. Clint, he corrects it. And don't thank me. The lesson hasn't started yet. Clint takes a sip of coffee and sets the cup down calmly. You know, Sophie, most people think that respect is earned with money or social position, but real respect doesn't work like that. It's earned with actions, with small gestures, and in this job the details matter more than you can imagine. Sophie tilts her head slightly, curious about the details. Clint nods. That's right. I'll give you an example. When someone walks through that door, he says, pointing to the main entrance of the restaurant, it doesn't matter who he is. It doesn't matter if he's wearing a $1 suit or a pair of ripped jeans. What matters is how you make him feel the moment he sits down at a table. Sophie looks down, remembering how she had treated Clint the night before, hadn't even given him a chance. He had decided based on his clothing that he was not a customer worthy of attention, and now he feels the weight of that mistake even more. When I walked in last night, go on, Clint, you did something that a lot of people do without even realizing it. You judged me, you saw me, and you thought you knew who I was without even knowing me. Sophie swallow. I was wrong. Clint smiles slightly. Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is, what did you learn from that mistake? Sophie takes a deep breath that I can't judge customers by appearances. Exactly, confirms Clint. But I want you to go further. It's not enough to avoid judgment. You have to learn to see customers for who they really are. Everyone has a story, Sophie, and sometimes that story can surprise you. Clint gets up from the table and beckons Sophie to follow him. They make their way to the main hall, still empty at this hour of the morning. The soft lights create an intimate, almost surreal atmosphere. Clint stops near an empty table and turns to her. Now we're going to do an exercise, says, imagine you're here during a normal shift. A man comes in and sits at this table. You don't know him, you don't know anything about him. How are you behaving? Sophie thought for a moment. I give him the menu and ask him if he wants something to drink. Clint nods. Okay, but what do you see in him? Beyond the clothes, Sophie looks around as if looking for invisible clues. I don't know. Maybe the way he sits, whether he's relaxed or nervous. Exactly, replies Clint. Body language is important. If you notice that it is tense or uncomfortable, you can adapt your approach. If you are relaxed, you can be more informal. But there is more. Look at the objects he carries with him. A briefcase, a book, the phone. These details tell you a lot about a person. Sophia nods, mentally taking note of every word. And if I'm wrong, if I misinterpret the signals, Clint smiles. You will be wrong is normal. But the trick is to learn from every mistake. Next time you will be more careful, and over time, it will become second nature. Clint stopped in front of the restaurant entrance and looked Sophie in the eyes. Now I want you to put into practice what you learned during today's shift. Observe customers and not just serve dishes and take orders. Try to understand who they are, what they really want, and above all, treat them all with the same respect, whether they are rich film producers or simple tourists. Sophie feels overwhelmed but also determined. For the first time since she started working at Beverly Prime, she feels that this job can offer her much more than just a career. It can teach you to be a better person. And remember, Clint adds before leaving her, never judge someone by their first impression. The most extraordinary people often hide behind the humblest appearances. Clint's first lesson planted a seed in Sophie's mind. Now she is not just a mere maid aiming for a promotion. She is a young woman prepared to embrace growth and learn from the impending shift, which will serve as her initial significant test. The Beverly Prime restaurant starts filling up shortly after 6 p.m. Sophie stands next to the counter with the list of reservations in her hands. Watch the customers come in one after the other. Elegant couples, businessmen, a group of influencers with smartphones ready to immortalize every moment. The atmosphere is the same every night, but for Sophie everything is different. Every detail now seems more important. She feels as if she has been given some special glasses, allowing her to see beyond the surface. He straightens his uniform and runs his hand through his hair, double-checking that everything is in perfect order. He absolutely cannot afford any mistakes, not tonight, especially after Clint's class. While bringing water to one of the tables, Sophie notices a woman sitting alone near the window, dressed in an elegant black dress, with a pearl necklace hanging delicately on her chest. She's clearly a wealthy woman, but there's something unusual about the way she drums her fingers on the table. She seems nervous. Sophie takes a deep breath and approaches. "Good evening, ma'am. Can I get you something to drink?" As she chooses the menu, she asks with a gentle smile. The woman looks up but doesn't smile. "Just a glass of water. For now. Thank you. I'm waiting for someone." Sophia nods and goes back to the counter to get the water. But the woman's thought does not leave her. There is something in her expression that strikes her. The way she's constantly checking her watch and phone isn't just any customer. Something's wrong. When he returns to the table with the water, he decides to take a little step further. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to call me," Sophie says in a sincere tone. The woman looks at her for a moment and then sighs. Actually, yes. She could recommend a wine that is not too strong, or she has had a heavy day. Sophie smiles slightly, feeling more confident. "Of course, I recommend a black wine. Light, it is delicate and relaxing." The woman nods and Sophie walks away to get the wine. When he comes back, the woman seems more relaxed. "Thank you," he tells her. It's not easy to find waiters who really care about customers. Those words warmed Sophie's heart. It's just a small gesture, but it made a difference. Shortly afterwards, while Sophie is taking the order of a known couple, a middle-aged man stands next to the door, wearing a light jacket and worn jeans. He looks uncertain, as if he doesn't know where to go. None of the colleagues seem to have noticed him, but Sophie approaches and smiles at him. "May I assist you, sir?" The man, visibly relieved, smiles and responds, "Yes, thank you. I'm not familiar with this area and wasn't sure if a reservation was needed." "Don't worry," Sophie replies. "We have a table available for you. Please follow me." While walking him to the table, she inquires about his origins and his purpose in Beverly Hills. She learns he is a tourist from Texas, visiting his favorite places in town. Sophie smiles as she listens to her stories and makes sure she has everything she needs. When she brings him the menu, she feels different. She's not just doing her job. She's creating an experience. Remember Clint's words, every customer has a story. Find out, and you'll have already won half the battle. Towards the end of the shift, Sophie sees him. Clint Eastwood is back. He's sitting at the same table as the night before. With the usual glass of whiskey, But this time, Sophie is not nervous. She approaches him confidently. "Good evening," Clint says with a genuine smile. "Can I get you something besides whiskey?" Clint looks at her with his usual enigmatic look, but this time there's a hint of approval in his eyes. "No, the whiskey is fine, but I'm curious to know how the evening is going." Sophie sits for a moment next to him. She was. Different admits, "I tried to do what he taught me. I don't know if I did everything right, but I listened to the customers, tried to understand who they were, not just what they wanted to order." Clint nods slowly. "And how did you feel?" Sophie reflects. "For a moment better, more connected. I understood that it is not just a job. It is an opportunity to make a difference, even in small things." Clint smiles and takes a sip of whiskey. "That's right. It doesn't matter if you work in a restaurant or 6'1" movie star. Every interaction is an opportunity to show who you really are." Before Sophie can say anything else, the woman sitting by the window gets up and approaches their table. "Excuse me," says, addressed to Clint, "but I just wanted to thank this young waitress. She was wonderful. She made my evening so much more enjoyable." Sophie blushes while Clint smiles amused. "See? People always notice people who do things from the heart." The woman walks away and Sophie finds herself looking at Clint with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. Not only did it help her correct her mistakes, but it also led her to a new awareness of herself. Sophie passed the test, put into practice what she learned from Clint, and discovered that true success isn't measured in promotions or tips, but in how you make people feel. But is there still a final lesson Clint wants to teach her? The dining room at Beverly Prime is almost empty. The lights are more subdued and the restaurant seems to breathe at a slower, more relaxed pace. After a busy evening, Sophie is arranging the napkins and glasses, but her mind is still focused on everything that happened. She feels changed for the first time. She is not anxious to finish her shift or find out how much tip she has earned. There's a different feeling, a sense of genuine satisfaction. Clint Eastwood is still there, sitting at his usual corner table. His whiskey glass is almost empty, and he looks at it calmly, as if he has all the time in the world. Sophie approaches with a tray in hand and a relaxed smile. "It's been an interesting evening," he says, setting the tray down on a nearby table. Clint looks up and smiles. "More interesting than you expected, right?" Sophie nods decisively. "I never thought an evening like this could teach me so much." Clint leans forward slightly, resting his elbow on the table. "And what did you learn?" Sophie takes a moment to reflect before answering. "I've learned that you can't judge someone by appearances. That every person who comes in here has a story. And my job is to make her feel welcome no matter who she is or what she's wearing." Clint smiles, satisfied. "Great. But there's one last thing I want you to remember." Sophie looks at him curiously. Clint leans back in his chair and interlaces his fingers in front of him. "In life, you will meet many people who will try to judge you. Tell you that you are not good enough, not smart enough, or not prepared enough. They will test you and try to make you feel small." Sophie feels a lump in her throat. The words sound familiar. You know what it's like to feel judged. But Clint's true strength does not lie in avoiding mistakes. Mistakes will happen. True strength is in the way you react. You fell today, but you got back up. That's what really matters. It's not just about how swiftly you can land a promotion or achieve a prestigious position. It's about how quickly and profoundly you can grow as a person. Clint's words felt like a soothing balm on a wound Sophie hadn't even realized she had. He understood that he wasn't merely trying to build a career. He was striving to prove something deeper, to herself and to others. And now he understands that this wasn't the authentic goal. The sound of Thomas's footsteps, the restaurant manager, interrupts the moment, approaches the table and addresses Clint. "Mr. Eastwood, can I disturb you for a moment?" Clint nods to Thomas. Thomas smiles and turns to Sophie. I have to congratulate you, Sophie. I have received several positive comments about you tonight. Looks like you did a really good job. Sophie blushes. Thank you, Thomas. Keep it up, he adds, before walking away. Clint watches her as she catches her breath, as if those words were the culmination of all the hard work of the evening. You see, people notice who works with the heart. Sophie, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Let your gestures speak for you. Clint gets up slowly and picks up his coat. Before leaving, he pulls a small envelope from his jacket pocket and hands it to Sophie. She looks at him in surprise. What is Clint? He smiles. Sophie opens the envelope and finds a small note with a handwritten quote. True greatness is never evident on the surface. It is hidden in small gestures, in silent decisions, in respect for others. Tears, they sting her eyes. Thanks, Clint. Really? Clint approaches the door, but before he leaves, he turns to her. Remember, Sophie, this is not the end. This is just the beginning. Keep learning, and you will do great things. With one last smile, Clint Eastwood walks out the door of Beverly Prime, leaving Sophie with a new awareness and motivation she had never felt before. 2 weeks later, Sophie receives a promotion as assistant manager. But this time it is not the promotion that makes her happy. It is the path she has taken, the inner change that has allowed her to see the world with different eyes, every day. When he enters the restaurant, he remembers Clint's words and the power of small gestures. Sophia faced her trial, learned from her mistakes, and discovered the value of true respect. Her story exemplifies how each interaction represents an invaluable opportunity to evolve and become a better individual. This narrative demonstrates that genuine success cannot be quantified purely through promotions or financial wealth, but rather through personal development and mutual respect. Every one of us possesses the potential to influence change. All that's required is the will and guidance from the appropriate life lessons. We deeply appreciate your time spent watching this video and hope you found it meaningful. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Share your experience in the comments below, telling about a moment when you learned something crucial from an unexpected event. Pass this video to someone who could use a bit of motivation. Enable the notification bell to get the latest updates on our upcoming videos. See you in the next one.